They say everyone's got a breaking point, but I don't think most people expect theirs to arrive wearing a knockoff uniform, carrying a plastic badge, and demanding $2,000 on their own front porch. That morning, standing there with sawdust still on my hands and the smell of coffee drifting from the garage, I realized I'd just become the star of a story nobody would believe unless they'd survived the HOA circus themselves. I'd spent decades in law enforcement, enough time to think I'd seen every flavor of crazy this side of the Rockies. Drunks fighting lampposts, sovereign citizens reciting internet law people who think a YouTube crash course trumps the actual Constitution. But I'll admit, I wasn't ready for this. See, my place sits on a corner lot. Bought it years before anybody in the neighborhood started whispering about bylaws or architectural review committees. It's just a modest house, a stretch of lawn big enough to fit my boat and give me space to rebuild the transmission on my old truck. For years, life was simple wave at the neighbor's nod at the mailman, fire up the grill on the weekends. Then overnight, the world changed. The old farm behind my house turned into a construction zone, bulldozers, survey flags, the whole patchwork. Soon after, they called the new cluster Whispering Pines Ridge, or something that sounds expensive in the brochures. And with the name came the HOA rules, thicker than my tax return, a board full of folks who thought being in charge of the mailbox color was a sacred duty. Here's the rub. My house was never in their little fiefdom. Never signed anything, never agreed, deeds clear as day, recorded in the county before their first slab was poured. I helped neighbors with jumper cables and tools, but I kept out of the HOA drama, at least until the board changed hands. It started slow, friendly letters taped to my door urging me to join because community matters. I tossed them polite but unmoved. Then came the threats. Suddenly, my weekly mowed grass was too high. My boat in the driveway community eyesore. My work truck apparently was the end of property values as we knew them. So I did what anyone with a sense of humor would do. I mailed them copies of my deed survey and a friendly note explaining they had the wrong guy. I figured that'd be the end. It wasn't. The letters got nastier. Now there were fines, talk of legal action claims that they ruled every house for miles, whether you liked it or not. Apparently me standing my ground was setting a dangerous precedent. That's when I knew it wasn't about paint colors or lawns anymore, it was about control. Truth is, I've seen power go to people's heads. Usually reality slaps them back down, but these folks, they doubled down. One Saturday morning, sun pouring through the garage radio low halfway through a cabinet for my wife, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up expecting a delivery. Instead, two men stepped out of a white sedan wearing matching dark uniforms, utility belts, badges catching the light. If I didn't know better, I'd have thought they were cops, except something was off. Uniforms too crisp, badges, too shiny faces I didn't recognize. And in my line of work, I know everyone. I walked out hands dusty, trying not to laugh. The tall one led with a clipboard. "We're with community enforcement. We need to talk to you about overdue association fees." There it was, the moment when fantasy meets brick wall. I let them talk honestly, curious how far they'd push this little charade. The tall guy recited a list of violations: commercial vehicle, unapproved boat, non-compliant landscaping. The short one snapped photos, muttering clear violation at my truck. I kept it friendly, told them they had the wrong house, explained again I wasn't part of their association. The tall guy sighed like I was the problem, said all properties within the development zone had to comply. "Can I see your identification?" I asked, mostly for the story. He handed over a laminated card, grainy photo, a made-up logo, the words Community Compliance Officer. No state seal, nothing official, just plastic. "This isn't law enforcement ID," I said, holding it up. He puffed up. "We're authorized by the HOA board." Right. Then I realized someone had convinced these two that a costume and a clipboard gave them real power. I told them, firm but polite, to leave my property. The short one stepped closer, trying his best tough guy voice. "Sir, we're conducting official business. You're required to cooperate." That was enough. I reached into my pocket, flashed my actual badge. "I'm Sheriff Daniel Mercer, and you're trespassing." Everything stopped. Clipboard slipped papers scattering in the breeze. The short guy's face drained of color. You're law enforcement. The real kind," I said. "Not whatever Halloween outfit this is." Suddenly they were stammering apologies, backing away, tripping over themselves to leave. I took out my phone, snapped pictures, badges, uniforms, car license plate. They peeled out of my driveway like teenagers caught sneaking in after curfew. Inside, I poured a coffee, pulled up their company online. Turns out the HOA had hired a so-called community compliance specialist, a business whose entire website was buzzwords, authoritative presence, enforcement services, uniformed officers. Never said police, but you know exactly what image they wanted. That's when my patience ran out. I called the number, got a chipper operator until I introduced myself as the sheriff. I laid out what her folks had done. The silence on her end was loud. They're clearly marked as compliance officers, she tried. They showed badges and claimed investigative authority, I replied. That's impersonation. She folded quick promise to pull out of the county and begged me not to escalate. I wasn't done. Next up, the HOA president, Linda Crowley, the type who enjoys Robert's Rules of Order a little too much. I met her at the community center, dropped photos, evidence printouts right on the table. She blustered, claimed it was all legitimate, but her voice trembled. I explained in plain terms what would happen if this became public. Fire the company, send letters to every homeowner, admit my house is outside your HOA, 48 hours. And if we don't, she whispered, media regulators the works. She agreed before I even finished. Within days, the company was gone. Phones disconnected, website down. The HOA mailed apologies to every resident. Social media blew up. Turns out I wasn't alone, seniors, single parents. All kinds of folks had been pressured or outright scared. Some paid just to get those officers off their porch. Linda and half the board quit. Neighbors I'd never spoken to stopped by to thank me. One guy even brought a six-pack. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about me, my truck, or my yard. It was about how fast people will back down when they're intimidated by the look of authority, even if it's fake. And how easy it is for small-time power to snowball into real harm. After that, things settled. New board quieter, neighborhood kids back on bikes, block parties instead of warning letters. I parked my boat where I wanted, and finally my mailbox stayed empty. But that whole mess left a mark. I noticed the way people defer to uniforms, how official language gets you to hand over money or rights without thinking. How silence is all bullies need. I'll be honest, I spent years wearing a badge that ended arguments and opened doors. But seeing it faked made me rethink how fragile that trust is. The new HOA board asked me to come to their first meeting. I showed up just a neighbor now. Packed room, people wanted answers. The new president said, "We forgot who the HOA is supposed to work for." That was the heart of it. Rules became weapons. Neighbors became targets. Folks didn't need more authority, they wanted honesty. Someone to admit the whole thing had spun out. Eventually, life got back to normal, the good kind. No more threats, no more policy dressed up as intimidation. People ask if I plan to sue or press charges. Sometimes exposure is punishment enough. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. That company folded because their game only worked in the shadows. But I'm not the same. I pay more attention now. I speak up sooner, not as sheriff, just as a neighbor who's seen what happens when nobody does. And there's a question I still can't shake. If I hadn't had that badge, if it'd been any other homeowner, how far would they have gone? Maybe a fake lien, maybe years of headaches, maybe paying up just to make it stop. That's the real danger, how little abuses pile up, how official language wears you down until you stop fighting. So I'm still here. Same truck, same house, same sawdust in the garage. But I look at authority and silence a whole lot differently. Now let me put this to you. If those two had knocked on your door, would you have pushed back or just gone along? Where's the line between community and control rules and rights order and intimidation? Drop your thoughts below. I read every one. And if you've ever had someone try to push authority they didn't really have, share your story. Because the only way this stops is if people stop falling for it.